Hello everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Darktable. In this episode, I would like to address two topics. The first is for new users and concerns the approach to editing. Darktable offers a lot of modules, and this can be very overwhelming because you don't necessarily know intuitively which modules are important and in which order to use them. The second topic is about working efficiently with Darktable. I hear often the criticism that you can't work effectively because you don't have a good basis or preset to achieve good results with just a few steps, which is very important for photographers who need to deliver fast results for the clients. As I am an event photographer myself, I would like to address this second topic first with a small example. What we see here is a Facebook post of a castle museum from which I get authors' photo assignments, and the photos you see here are mine, and if you take a closer look of the first photo, you will see a quite well-lit scene. But what also becomes immediately clear is that the illumination comes only from one source, from the windows. No other light sources has been present. If you look at the original scene we have now in the Darktable, you can immediately see how difficult the lighting conditions were. The day was cloudy and only light source is the background from the windows. In order to not to lose the details in the windows, I had to shut the scene underexposed and brighten the room afterwards so that the details remain preserved. And I had to be careful not to create any artifacts or texture distortions in the shadows or highlights so that the photo wouldn't look like cheap HDR processing. So I had to make sure that the photo still looked somewhere realistic. This would have been absolutely impossible to achieve if I had only shot in JPEG format. Even as a RAW file, this would not be achievable just with the two steps. And that is an important point to discuss with the client before taking on the job. He must adjust his expectations accordingly. If he wants fast results, he must be ready to accept lower quality. As a photographer, you must not forget that the clients appreciate not only your skillful work, but also your aesthetic look, your unique expression. If they are convinced of that, they are ready to invest in it. How fast you operate your tools plays only a marginal role. In this episode, we will see how to optimize your work with Darktable. But now back to the first topic. As you can see, I have selected some photos from one of my recent contract works, and I have documented one Baroque festival photographically, and I would like to show you on the basis of a couple of motifs how to proceed as a new user and how to use the possibilities that Darktable offers you for effective work. The first photo here I duplicated because we can compare the processing steps with in the RAW file embedded JPEG file that camera has produced. Now, when we go to the darkroom, when processing any photo, the same aspects are always important to consider. On one side, we have the technical corrections that concern the camera itself and the lenses, such as lens correction, denoising, etc. And on the other side, the appearance of the photo, the corrections like exposure, contrasts, local contrasts, and colors. Darktable offers corresponding modules for all these aspects. Normally, one starts with technical corrections and continues with appearance corrections. All those modules are grouped according to their purpose in the upper tabs, so you can find them in those tabs here. But what you can see, however, is that I have an extra tab with modules that I use often so that I can access them immediately without having to go to the other tabs to search for them here there. And this is already the first way to customize the Darktable to be more effective. Now let's see what modules I have there. The first module, what you can see here, is highlight reconstruction, which can be quite helpful if you have overexposed areas, and you can try to use some of those algorithms in highlight reconstruction to reconstruct the data they have been lost through that overexposure. The next one is row chromatic aberrations. That means you can get rid of some kind of color shifts on the edges. That is chromatic aberrations, which is caused by lens. And sometimes helped to use row chromatic aberration, but we have also one extra module for chromatic aberration accordingly, which also can be used. And you can try both of them or one of them, which it depends which one works better for your lenses. Then we have denoising, denoise profile. That is the main denoising module in Darktable. That can be used if you have if you shoot with high ISO, so you have a lot of noise. You can try to get rid of that noise with the denoising module here. Lens correction, you are correcting the geometry of the lenses here, and also chromatic aberrations and vignetting if you have vignetting in your lenses. Then chromatic aberrations, what I talked about before. Then we have rotation and perspective, which you can correct the perspective of the photo. And these are those, what I call them, technical corrections. And after that, you can correct also that appearance of the photo. The first module is exposure module, which can be useful for brightening or darkening the photo. The next one is tone equalizer, which is quite nice and sophisticated tool to be able to adjust the brightness locally. That means you can influence shadows and highlights separately. Then we have crop. It's of course to crop some part of the photo. And the next one, what I have here, is also quite important, color calibration. And color calibration has a lot of functions, but is mainly used for one purpose, for white balancing, which is actually quite easy, although it looks too complicated. I will demonstrate that later. Then we have diffuse and sharpen, and diffuse and sharpen is also one nice module which can help you to add some local contrast or sharpening to your photo. Contrast equalizer have a similar function like diffuse and sharpen, and use it sometimes. Sometimes I have better results with contrast equalizer or vice versa. And the next module, which is quite important, is color balance RGB. This module you can use for saturation, for adding saturation, and also is quite nice for adding some contrasts in the photo. And you have a 4 ways tab, which can also be useful if you want to color grade your photo. And the last one is filmic RGB. That is actually a tone mapper. You can compress your dynamic range to be able to fit in that smaller color space for exporting, and have also a lot of functions. Sometimes could be interesting to touch some of those options to change them to be able to get good results. So these are modules that I'm mostly using. I'm rarely, very rarely using some other modules than those. So we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 modules which are very important, and the rest you can try, you can use to your liking. Okay, now the question is how I have created that spatial tab with my modules. That's actually quite easy. You have this hamburger here, hamburger icon. When you click there, and you can go to the last option, manage presets. When you click there, you can add new one and add a module group with plus sign here. So new one here, and add module group with the plus sign, and then you can name it. So I have this one is my own created, and you have also in your new tab you have the plus sign here. You can, if you click there, you have option to add some modules to your list. So you can create that list with the modules that you often use, and you can use that for your editing. Okay, so let's get started with editing, and I will show you how to approach. One more thing which is quite important is that you set up your Darktable to use so-called scene referred workflow, or one modern workflow, and that can be done in preset, in preferences, excuse me. And if you go to processing tab, you will see auto apply pixel workflow defaults as scene referred, and also auto apply chromatic adaptation defaults to modern. Those two settings need to be done to be able to follow what I'm try to show you in this episode. And what that means, please read in documentation, or there are a lot of YouTube videos about these new workflow, so that we don't lose too much time on explaining that. So after you do that setting, you need to go to the light table, and now you need to mark all your photos that you didn't edit it. Well, for me, for example, all of those photos that I have here are not edited, so I can mark them all and then discard history, and after that, that modern workflow will be applied to every photo automatically. And what that means I will show you by editing. Now, as you can see, I have a duplicated first photo. On that is because I would like to show you the difference between in the raw file embedded JPEG file created by the camera and my own edit. And we can go now to the first one and turn on culling mode, and also disable both panels, left and right. And now we have both copies on the full screen. And now if I go with the mouse in one of those, for example in that left one, and press W, you can see it also in the full screen. Now if I made some changes in one of those files, let's say in the left one, let's go in the light table, and I will add just a little bit exposure just to have some change, and go back to the light table, and you will immediately see that the Darktable uses now the raw file to display what is going on. And now we can compare both. That will be quite handy when we are editing our photo, and we can compare our edit to the internal JPEG. Okay, let's get started. Now we are back to the darkroom with our left photo, left copy if you wish. And as you can see, we have immediately few modules. I'm now in my own tab, and you can see we have few modules already activated. If I go to the first tab here, show only active modules, you can see we have quite a bit of modules which are automatically started. So these are the modules that have been used for that so-called referred workflow. So we don't have base curve, but we have filmic, color calibration, exposure, orientation, and so on. Those modules are applied now to the photo before I even started editing. Okay, now I can go back to my own tab with my own list of the modules, and I can now start editing. Okay, let's start with some corrections. I will start with lens correction. I don't think we need denoising, but what we need, you can immediately recognize here on that edge. We need chromatic aberrations. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can use chromatic aberration, row chromatic aberration, and try to see what is going on. For example, in this case, it doesn't work quite nicely. We have now green edge, so we won't use that one. But you can also adjust that in lens correction module. If you go to the mode here, TCA, override, you can try to adjust that chromatic aberrations there or remove them. Now if you click that, you get two sliders, and you can try to manually adjust that chromatic aberrations. For example, we have the red channel quite wide, so we can try to go back with that and to see what we can get. Not too much. Something like that. Now, as you can see, I have reduced that chromatic aberrations already and the lens correction module. If you see more of that, you can now use also a chromatic aberration module itself, and you can adjust there some things. Okay, but that's enough for adjustments. And now we need to go further. So I would like to add some exposure because my photo is too dark. And now we have about exposure about right, because we want to see those people nice illuminated. And let's compare that first with our internal JPEG. As you can see, our internal JPEG is already quite contrasty, and we also need to adjust a little bit white balance. Our edited photo is reddish, and we need also more contrast there. So let's see, just real quick. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the darkroom, and let's see what we do in the next step. So we need to do two things. We need to white balance our photo and add some contrasts. And for white balancing, we will use color calibration module, the CAT tab. And only thing what we need to do here is to press that color picker on the left. Now color calibration or white balance part of the color calibration, try to estimate the white balance on the whole image. You can also use some part of the image if you want. For example, we can use this part here, but I don't think it's too yellowish. I will leave it there with estimation of the whole photo in this case, and only readjust a little bit of chroma here. So it looks a little bit too cold, and I will give it some warmth, so that we have that white parts, not too bluish, but also the red parts are not too reddish, something like that. And now if you are not satisfied, you can play with hue and chroma sliders even more, but it's enough for me. And now let's see how it looks before and after, or not before, after, in comparison to the JPEG. And I think it's okay. But one thing is quite interesting. If we are comparing those areas here, this area and also this one, we have here still some bluish look, and that is because, going back to the darkroom, that is because the filmic RGB using some kind of preservation of chromaticity in the option tabs. When you go to the option tabs, you will see that option preserve chrominance, this one, and the default is max RGB algorithm. And I think, and to my taste or to my experience, I don't want to use those preservation of chrominance because it I'm noticed that I'm losing some details in the highlights, and also the highlights are somehow oversaturated. So I'm just disabling that option. So I don't want to preserve any chrominance there. And now, to my taste, the photo looks much better. So now we can go back and to compare that. Now you can see the highlights are not so saturated and not so bluish, and we have some more details there. So and also I have made that as a preset, so when I editing some photos, I apply that preset automatically. How to do that? For example, I have made that change now, and I can go here to this hamburger thingy and add store new preset. I can give it name, and also turn the option auto apply this preset to magic images. You don't need to do anything else. And if you go with OK, and next time or when you load your photos, that preset will be applied to every photo. So that's what I have done with the filmic. That's only automatic preset that I use for me. And now the next step, what we need to do is just to add some contrast. Let's go back for a moment to see before and after. Yeah, we need some contrast in our edited photo. So let's go back, and to be able to do that, we can use color balance RGB module. And color balance RGB module has a lot of options, but they are not so complicated. What I'm using mostly are those sliders here, and first two are quite similar. Those two slider groups. So we have linear chroma grading and perceptual saturation grading. You can add with both of them. You can add in some areas, particular areas, shadows, midtones, and highlights, some intensity, color intensity. The only difference is by perceptual saturation grading, you are adding saturation and also darkening those areas a little bit, so you get a bit more contrast through the saturation. That's only the difference. And the third option, perceptual brilliance grading, is practically one nice option to adjust your contrast in the photo. For example, in this case, I will just go with the shadows a little bit down and with highlights up. So practically I am adding some contrast there. As you can see, we have already quite nice contrast, and maybe I will add some saturation in shadows. I will use perceptual saturation grading for that, maybe a bit more or something like that, and midtones, and maybe remove that saturation from the highlights so that we have that natural saturation, because we perceive the saturation in highlights not so much as in midtones and the shadows. So we have practically now We have now nice white balance and also some nice contrast. So let's compare that again with our internal JPEG, and you can see we are quite similar now. So let's see. The internal JPEG is a little bit colder, and I think my version is a bit more realistic. If I'm comparing them, when we are talking about white balancing. And then one other thing what you would like to improve, as you can see, we are quite tight on the edge. Here's the edge of our dynamic range, and highlights are quite tight there. So I will also use tone equalizer, which is quite nice tool to influence your brightness of the photo locally. And I will adjust the mask exposure compensation, and go in Advanced tab and just see where are the highlights, somewhere here, and I will go with the highlights just a bit down. And now you can see we have some contrast in the highlights back. Well, let's compare that again. Yeah, I will say we have now more contrast. If you look in this area here, we have a bit more contrasts there, and also in the hair, as you can see. Okay, so let's see what should be the next step. The last step that I would like to do is to add some local contrast to the photo, and for that I will use Diffuse and Sharpen module. And it's quite complicated module because you have a ton of options, but it's not so complicated to understand how it works. So let's demonstrate that real quick. And for that I will first zoom to the 100% so that we can recognize the details of the photo. And I will add about, I don't know, 9 or 10 iterations so that we have the much stronger effect. You won't need that much, but I would like for demonstration to have that strong effect. And look what happens if I now move those 4 sliders here, which are the main sliders for adding of sharpening or diffusing. And if I use the first order speed and go to the right direction, I'm diffusing, and if I go in the opposite direction, I'm sharpening practically that photo. And now you can see the difference between that order speed. If I go back now with the first order speed, remember that for example in the face we have only influenced the coarse part of the edges, and now if I go to the 4th order speed, the diffusion or the sharpening is much finer. Now we are also influencing every edge on the face, for example. And in both cases we also have that haloing around the edges, and the higher the haloing is on the edges where we have quite big difference in the brightness between the one part of the edge. For example, we have on this side we have quite high brightness, and on this side we are on the shadows, almost on the shadows of the midtones. And if you have that edge with that high difference in the brightness, you will also have quite high quite haloing there. And to be able to get rid of that, you can use edge sensitivity function here, this one, which can help you to exclude those edges with quite, let's say, steep difference between in the brightness. So if I move now that edge sensitivity to the right, you can see those edges are excluded. So, for example, if I want to sharpen the photo, I can use that first order speed and go with edge sensitivity quite high to be able to remove those artifacts on the edges. You can see. But I don't want to sharpen the photo. I would like to add some local contrast, so I don't want to use that sharpen, that fourth order speed, but some other. Let's say I will use the third order speed here, which is quite similar to the fourth, but it's not too doesn't influence too much the finest parts. And I will add some edge sensitivity, just a little bit. And what I also can do, I can use Alt as edge threshold for enhancing those details. Look what is happening if I'm going to the left direction. Now I have every pixel is practically influenced, and if I go in the other direction, I'm excluding some pixels from that equation. So we have now some kind of local contrast, which is much better. But what I also can do, I will go back with the edge threshold here. I can also add some radius span. For example, if I go there, now I have quite harsh transitions in the shadows, in the edges. And to be able to cope with that, I don't want to use too many iterations. For example, I will go back a little bit. Let's say first only the 6 iterations. And what I also can do, I can force the sharpening only to the edges. Or not only to the edges, mostly to the edges, and less to that opposite direction. And to be able to do that, I need to use also the direction of that sharpening. If I'm using third order speed, I will also need to use third order anisotropy. And if I go, for example, in right direction, I'm forcing practically that sharpening only along the edge, or mostly along the edge, or less along that opposite direction of the edge. And as you can see now, we have adjusted a little bit that local contrast, but it's quite too much. I don't need to use so many iterations, so I go back now about maybe 2 iterations. Let's keep it down, and as you can see, it's quite nice, but I don't want to influence the darkest shadow too much. As you can see, maybe in this area here, if I disable it, I'm adding quite a lot of contrast there in the darkest shadows, so I don't want to do that. So I can also use, for this case, I can also use something like parametric mask. For example, exclude those darkest shadows from the equation. Maybe also add some feathering so that it looks much more natural. And now practically I have adjusted my local contrast. It's quite subtle, but it's enough for this case. So let's see before and after. And now I can save this this setup as a preset, and I have already some kind of preset like that. I called it Clarity 2, and as you can see, I have quite a lot of different presets for different situations, so you can also do that, and that will help you to get quick results without moving every time all those sliders. So I can apply now my Clarity 2, and I have that nice local contrast, which is enough for this photo, as you can see before and after. And now we can compare it again with our embedded JPEG. So this is how JPEG looks like, and now our edit. And my edit looks much better now because I have now better colors, I have now nicer contrasts, and also local contrasts. That means I have much better definitions in the in those area where we have the highlights. So now I will now continue editing other photos what I have chosen. So we will repeat all those steps to be able to show you how can you quick and relatively easy edit your photos. So this is the next one. The first thing what I also always do is to make some corrections if needed. In this case, I think it's enough to add lens corrections, and now I can immediately see how the brightness looks like, and I can add just a tiny bit of brightness to the photo so that I already have a nice look of the people here. And of course, I need also some contrast, so I can go to the color balance RGB and going down with the shadows in the perceptual brilliance grading, and maybe add some brilliance in the highlights. But as you can see now, I'm clipping, I'm going overboard in this area here. So that means we need to deal with that. But before I do that, I will also adjust the saturation. So add much more saturation in the shadows, and maybe in midtones, and maybe remove a bit saturation from the highlights. And now saturation wise it looks nice. I don't know, do we need to correct some white balancing? Maybe. Let's see what we get. Okay, automatically we are getting quite colder look, but doesn't matter. We can go with chroma down, and I think this is quite nice, or maybe just a little bit more. And now we need to deal with that crashed highlights. So we will use tone equalizer, adjust mask exposure compensation so that we get those highlights here in that area, which we can then influence. And now I will go just a little bit down with a slider. And now we have all highlights back, and also the details in that area. And as last step, I need to add some diffusion and sharpen. So as you remember from the last example, I will now use clarity 2, and we are done. So next one. So here we need to add some exposure again. Let's go that far. And maybe in this case I don't want to go too far to the edge with exposure, because I would like to add that color balance, contrasts. So I'm going to the color balance RGB, shadows down, highlights higher, and of course saturation. We are practically done with contrasts and saturation. I think we don't need to change anything with white balancing. White balancing is quite nice in this one, but we have one problem, and that is the only problem that cannot be solved so easy with Darktable, and I hope that will be done in the future. That vignetting of the lens. Now I have, for my lens, I have that correction here, lens correction I recognized, but the Darktable relies on an external database for the lens correction called LensFun, and some lenses are good corrected, but my have a nice correction of the geometry, and also with chromatic aberrations, but doesn't have corrections for vignetting. So I need to do that manually, and it's not easy way to do that. I have some preset made for tone equalizer. I will now apply that, but it's not so nice. So let's use that one. So I have that kind of curve here for that lens, and I need also to add some mask. So it will be that circle mask, and I will apply that and can play a little bit with those values here. And it works somehow, but not in every case. In this case it's okay, but not in every case. So it will be good to be able to use some kind of new module, or that you have some kinds of new module for devignetting or remove that vignetting, or if we could have some option in the less correction similar to the options what we have for correction of the chromatic aberrations. If you could have that correction for vignetting, it will be nice, but doesn't matter. As you can see, we can correct that to some part. And the last step what I need to do after lens correction is of course diffuse and sharpen. Let's apply the clarity, and I think we are done in this case also. Okay, this one is interesting because we have clipping here on the lamps. I need to be careful, and the photo is also a bit darker. So how to approach this one? Okay, first lens correction, maybe denoising if you need. I think we need denoising here. Let me see. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, we can leave it like that. And now I will add some exposure, not too much, because I will now use tone equalizer. Adjust first that mark exposure compensation so that we have the whole dynamic range here. And I will try something interesting. I will go with shadows high and try to make some kind of linear brightening from the shadows to the highlights. And I don't want to influence the highlights at all here, that area, but only midtones and shadows, but linearly. So hide in there, something like that. So that we have much more brightening of the shadows than the rest, because we have those areas. And maybe I could try to use guided filter for preservation of details, not that default exposure independent guided filter, because we can have a bit more details. Yeah, that's nice. And now we need to add some contrast, so we're going to color balance HAP, and I will try to add only shadows, a little bit contrast, and add some contrasts, or no, I would like to remove that brilliance from the shadows and add some brilliance in the highlights, and I have nice contrast now. But we have too much, the highlights are too high. So let me first adjust the saturation, and now we will go with one more tone equalizer. And we use one more tone equalizer only for the highlights. So I can go quite left with that indication here, with that histogram, so that I can influence the highlights a bit better. And now I go down until I see some details in that area where I have lamps. I don't want to lose them. What happens if I use also guided filter? Oh yeah, that's good. That works nice. And now how we have the details, not in the lamps too much, but in the area around the lamps. I don't care if they are clipping. And by the way, I'm using development measure of the Darktable, and we have now two additional options for highlight reconstruction, segmentation based and in paint opposed, and they are working quite nice. So that was nice work from Jens Hanno Schwan. This is one of the developers who is caring for those kind of things in the Darktable, and he has done a quite nice job for highlight reconstruction. I rarely need to do some adjustments here. Just the default setting here is quite enough for that. So that will be in the next version of the Darktable. Okay, now we need some clarity here, and maybe readjusting of the white balancing because it was too reddish. Now it's too bluish, so we need to go a bit down with this chroma. I will say something like that. It's quite nice. So let me see. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, next one. Here we have one nice portrait. So let's go with lens correction, maybe denoising. Let me see. Yeah, that's nice. That's okay. Exposure, we need to add some brightness to the photo so that we can clearly see his face. And of course now color balance RGB. As you can see now we can be quite quick because we know what we do, what we need to do. Color calibration, something like that, and diffuse and sharpen. You see, yeah, I think we're good. Do we need some? No, we don't need any other adjustments. We don't need. We haven't lost the highlights. So next one. This one is nice. I think this one looks like painting. So first lens correction, denoising. Let me see the details. Okay. Then what we need is brightening a little bit. I think for this one I will also use my custom devignetting thingy, which I hope will be, or something similar will be in the future versions of the Darktable. But let me adjust it first. Something like that. Color balance RGB. Darken the shadows and highlights. Give the highlights a little bit of brightness. And now we need to use one more tone equalizer module just for the highest highlights. We need to bring them back in the gamut. Maybe even so. Just in this area here. Diffuse and sharpen. I don't know, color calibration. I think I could add, let me see, I could add a bit more yellowish look to that scene because it looks like painting somehow. And what I also could do is to straighten the perspective here, so we can use rotation and perspective module. And if I click here in this area, the Darktable, oh, come on, the Darktable will, or that module will try to recognize the edges, and we can now try to straighten it. Now, if you click there only once, and if you don't have enough information, you can also press Control key and click it again, and then that module will try to find even more edges, and you can be maybe sometimes more precise for that. But in this case, works quite nice. We don't need to do anything else here. Yeah, that is this photo like a painting. I like it a lot. Okay, next one. Okay, this one also needs some exposure, and as you can see, I don't need to start with the correction if I don't want. I would like in this case to see a little bit more the details and to be able to judge what I need to do. So that was the first thing that I have done, but I could also start with lens correction, denoising, whatever. Okay, now we have nice exposure. Let's see about contrasts. I think it's too reddish, so we need also to calibrate that real quick. Maybe give it a bit more yellowish look, and Yeah, we can use tone equalizer for the highest highlights. Maybe let me see, how can I recover some details, although it's not really needed here, but whatever, why not? Yeah, nice. And diffuse and sharpen for adding some local contrast. I don't know, do we need something else? Maybe a tiny bit more brightening. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, next one. Portrait. So exposure, lens correction, denoising, color balance, RGB, saturation in shadows and midtones, but remove saturation from the highlights, and of course we need here some contrast, maybe not too far. Let's say something like that. And color calibration means the white balancing, some details, and I will say we're good here. Next one. So lens correction, denoising. Okay, a bit more exposure. We would like to see those all four persons clearly, but in this case we have now the problem that in this area we have maybe clipping, but doesn't matter. We will ignore that and go with color balance RGB. I need my contrasts, and we can deal with that highlights later. And now we can use tone equalizer just for the highest highlights. That's this area here, so go down and we have those details back. Maybe diffuse and sharpen. Let's use clarity again, and I don't know, maybe also rotational perspective, but this time I would like only to correct that vertical part so it looks nice. And I always compare that with this how it calls color assessment conditions, so you can compare it with the white and mid-gray. Yeah, that's nice. Next one. Old lady. So some exposure, colors, contrasts. I don't know, color calibration. Do we need that? Yeah, let me try. Okay, it's too bluish. Something like that. Diffuse and sharpen. Just use the preset. Oh no, that was wrong one. Let's use clarity. Yeah, I don't think we need denoising here, but we need lens corrections. Maybe in this case I will add one more exposure and darken the bottom part here. So I need to toggle the polarity of the mask, something like that, and go and darken that area a little bit, so that we have nice framing of the woman. So nice one. As you can see, we can now really quick edit our photos with this method. It's not too much hassle, and in this case I think we'll use tone equalizer for both. First for to brighten a little bit the details in the shadows, and also darken the highlights. So do we need a bit more contrast? Yeah. Okay, no, we can use one more tone equalizer because I need only the highest highlights, this area here, because I'm losing there details, something like that. Okay, diffuse and sharpen for local contrast, lens correction, denoising, I don't know, maybe we don't need it. And in this case, it looks also quite nice, almost like a painting, so I will also try to give this photo a bit more, so orangey or yellowish look. I like it, like that, quite nice. Okay, and now, because we have the similar scene here on the other photo, we can use all those settings what we have done for this photo by copying it here in the history stack. So we can copy that and go to the next photo, and I will use selective paste because I can now choose which module should be applied there, which have been applied in the photo before. And do we have something that not belong to the next photo? No, we can use all those settings, and with OK, now we have the same history on this one, but I think in this case I will go to the tone equalizer number 2 and just go down a little bit more with the highlights so that we don't lose the details there, something like that, and we're done. So that's one quite nice option that you can use for if you have the photos with similar scene or similar colors. You can just transfer that history from one photo, edit history to the next one. You only need to be sure that you have here the option set to override, so that you're not adding additional modules there, just override that history from the photo that you need to apply new history to. Okay, next one. This one is also a real quick exposure, color balance, maybe not too much contrast. I'm looking only now on the face of the woman. I'm ignoring everything else because we can adjust that later. Yeah, we are losing some details in those highlights here. It doesn't matter because now we can use tone equalizer as before and readjust that, bring those highlights back. Done. Diffuse and sharpen, we need some local contrast, so we will use clarity option here, what we have made before. I don't know, lens corrections. How about white balancing? I don't think we need to do that, but let's see what we get. No, that's too cold, too reddish. So let's turn that off. Or maybe let's do that custom. Maybe a bit colder. Let me see. Now, as you can see, I'm eyeballing the white balance. I'm not fan of some matte behind that. I'm just looking what to my eye looks nice. For me, it's not important to have that perfect white balance. And now next one. Exposure. A bit more contrast. And saturation. Yeah, nice. I think we could also, yeah, that's better. Adjust that white balance, diffuse and sharpen, lens correction. Yeah, that looks nice. We don't need anything else. Next one. So this one is interesting because our main subject is a little bit darker than a surrounding. So let's use that, and that. And as you can see, we have nice contrast, but we are clipping with the highlights, or the highlights are quite high here. So we also need tone equalizer. I have also the preset for the highlights thingy, so I can use that preset. And now I can readjust a little bit that thingy, and now we have details on the highlights back. But I'm not satisfied with the colors, so let's see what we get. No, it's too greenish. In this case, I could try, because we have a nice flat white area here. Let's use something like that. Yeah, that's good. That looks good. And one more thing, what I can do in this case, I would like to brighten a little bit those warmer colors. So I can use color calibration one more instance and go to the brightness tab, maybe click on the normalized channel so that we don't have to grow big differences in the brightness later. And now I can just brighten the red channel a little bit and maybe darken the blue. And as you can see, now we have the faces of the woman, or the both women, we can clearly recognize them. They're much brighter now. And the one more thing beside length correction is, of course, we can try to adjust the perspective here. And as you can see in this case, the rotation and perspective mode, you cannot find enough lines or enough edges, so I can press Control key and click one more, and now we have enough. So let me see what we get. Nice. It's quite nice correction option. It works really, really good. I rarely need to readjust something. I think I would like to add a bit more saturation to here. I don't know, for whatever reason. And of course, we need a bit more clarity. That means a bit more local contrast. And now we're done. Next. This one is also interesting. So it could be some kind of high key photography. So let me see. We don't need to talk too much there. But okay, you see, we need to bring back our highest highlights. And I will also use, for this case, one more instance of color calibration for brightening the reds. How about white balancing? Yeah, that's better. And diffuse and sharpen. Lens corrections. Nice. Next one. So, exposure, color, balance, RGB. I don't think we need to darken the shadows, because we already have nice dark background. And also in this case we need, I will say, to brighten a little bit the reds. Calibration. And diffuse and sharpen. Lens correction. Do we need anything else? Do we have lost some details? No. So we're done with this one. Next one. As you can see now, we have come on. We're quite quick with our editing, because we know what needs to be done, and you only need a few steps for almost for every photo. I think this one can also use that option that I used for the similar scene, and I have also a preset for that, so we can use tone equalizer and use the preset. I can call it like that. Maybe readjust a little bit and go with exposure a bit down. Let me just readjust that. And now color balance RGB. Doing too much here. Let me see. Yes, that's nice. And do we need? No, we don't need any correction of the highlights, but we need some diffusion. Not diffusion, some local contrast, excuse me. And I think denoising also. Let me see. Yes, we need a lot of denoising. And as you can see in this case, I think I have quite high ISO here. Now you can also correct if you have too much noise. You can try to use those curves here for readjustment. And now if you use that GO thingy, you are removing that grainy noise, and see, it's quite nice. If you have some fine noise, it's not a problem. I don't need to remove that. But if you want to remove that also, you can also add one more instance. And this time I will suggest not to use wavelets, but local means. First auto mode, and then go back to the non-local means alone. And I don't think you need to have too much strength there, so you go with the strength down, and you will also get rid of the fine noise without losing the details. So you need practically two denoising modules. In this case it's not necessary, but just for demonstration purpose. Okay, next one. And now you can see we have similar scene there, so we can repeat that. Copy and selective paste there. Do we have something which is not needed in this scene? No, we can apply everything there and see what needs to be readjusted. And I think the brightness is too high here in this scene, so we can try to use, or not the brightness, but the highlights. So we'll use one more tone equalizer for only for the highlights, and go down with the highlights. And as you can see now, we can recognize the lamps now quite nicely. Nice. We don't need. I don't think we need to do anything here, anything more. Next one. This one is too dark, and we have. I could apply that history from those two to this one, but I would like to start again with this one without applying it, because I think by this one I need to be a bit more careful, because it's quite dark. We have those lamps there, and it could be some issues. So let's start with exposure, lens correction, denoising first, and I will also apply that linear tone equalizer thingy. I don't know how to call that, just to brighten the shadows and midtones quite a lot. And let me see, let's try to use guided filter. Yeah, that works, because we will now get a bit more details there. Now let's go a bit higher. I don't know, shadows. Okay, this time we need to add some brightness in the midtones and also in the highlights, but leave that shadows as they are, and go here with we need to readjust that saturation. And now I need one more tone equalizer just for the highest highlights, just to bring back those lost details there. Nice, look at that. And let me think, maybe we can recalibrate that white balancing there. I'm not sure. I don't like too much red or that warm colors. And also we need a local contrast. And maybe just tiny bit brightening of the warm colors. Let me see. Yeah, not too much. That's enough. I don't want to flatten that photo. Maybe tiny bit, yeah. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now it looks nice. Next one. So, exposure. Color calibration to readjust those colors. I'm not sure. Something like that. Lens correction, denoising, diffuse and sharpen for local contrasts, and I think we need to straighten also the perspective. So I don't know. Let's use this one. Yeah, that's okay. Nice. Next, now we have this lady here, and as you can see, in this case we are also quite on the edge of the brightness, so let's see what can be done. I think I will start in this case lens correction, of course denoising, but with color balance RGB, and just darken the shadows. A tiny bit brightness on the highlights and go that path. Remove saturation from the highlights, and I would like to brighten a little bit the face of the woman, so we can use one more instance of the exposure module. Adjust quick mask. Let's use that brush thingy. I don't know, something like that. Let me see how that looks like. Feathering. Maybe a bit more contrast here. Something like that. That's enough. And now we can brighten the face of the woman, so it doesn't look too dark. And of course, some local contrast. And how it looked like. Maybe we will use one more tone, or we will use tone equalizer just for the highlights. So let's use those highlights preset. But maybe I just want to influence the highest highlights and not the midtones too much. In this case, what also can be done is to spread that the histogram, so you can use precisely, you can influence precisely the area that you want to influence without influence of the other. For example, something like that. Yeah. How about using also guided filter here? No. Okay, let's try again. I messed something up. So that was the idea. Nice. Okay, next one. So exposure, color balance, RGB, and some saturation, diffuse and sharpen, clarity, lens correction, denoising. Let me just check real quick. Nice. And I don't know, color calibration. Do we need some adjustments of the white balance? Something like that. Done. I think we're nice. We don't have any issues with highlights. Oh, wait a minute. We can use this one, copy it, and paste to those two next photos. So selective paste. Okay, and now we have those adjustments also on next two photos, because we have the similar scene. So we can readjust a little bit the details. I think it's too bright, so we just go with exposure a little bit down in this one and also in the next, and we are good. I will say something like that. Nice portrait. So exposure, some contrast. Let's see, something like that. Clarity, lens correction, denoising. How about details? Yeah, no, that's nice. We don't need to be better. And I will say it's okay. We don't need to do anything else on this one. Maybe we can use now this copy and paste it to those two next. And I'll see what we get. So we don't need to readjust anything. Maybe just a little bit brightness. Get brighter. And also this one. And we're good. Let's apply it also there. And just go with the brightness a bit more, a bit higher. Let's say something like that. Maybe a bit more contrast. And not too much in the highlights. Something like that. Okay, next one. Okay, let's do this one from the scratch. I could apply those presets, not preset, but there. Let's see immediately the color balance RGB is quite nice. You have immediately quite nice contrasts. That's nice. Diffuse and sharpen. Preset. As you can see, I have only used clarity, but I could have been used also other presets. But for purpose of our video, clarity is enough. You can also combine some denoising, and I think we are good. How about colors? Actually, it's quite good. Let's leave it there. This one. So some exposure, contrasts, saturation. In this case, we need to white balance it a little bit. So it's now cold again, but maybe just a bit more warmer. Diffuse and sharpen. Let's use clarity for that. Lens correction, denoising. You see the details. And then we need more. Let's see what we get if we are going Just a bit more. Yeah, that's nice. And we're done. Next one. Now we have backlight here. In this case, I will also use something else. I think what could be nice to go with exposure bit down, bit up, and now use tone equalizer, another preset. I call that one completely linear inward. As you can see, I haven't practically this kind of diagonal curve, which flattened that dynamic range like that. You could add some exposure, you know, even more, and readjust the mask here. Now I can use color balance RGB because we don't need too much in the shadows, but go with the highlights, a little bit in the shadows, and use one more tone equalizer just for the highlights. Where are they? Here. I don't want to lose any details in the sky. And now color calibration. Let's see what we get. Maybe a bit more colder in this case. And I will also use one more instance of color calibration to brighten the red channel, darken the blue, and also play a little bit with that channel mixer thingy. In this case, I don't know, I think I would like to have some kind of something like that. And diffuse and sharpen, of course, clarity, lens correction, and we have something which is quite nice. We don't need, we didn't lose any details in the sky, although this quite backlighting scene is. So next one. Exposure, bit contrast. I don't know. Well, that's okay, I will say. And I don't think we need color calibration for the white balancing for that. But what we'd like to do, let me think. I can use now contrast equalizer. You'll see what I mean. Mask the greens, so we can use edge thing. Let me see what we get with a mask. Feathering, yeah. Oh, I don't know what I have. Opacity. Oh, excuse me. It was not meant to be used. Let me see how I can go. Oh, farther. Something like that. Now, I would like to remove that local contrast from the greens, so that I have some kind of, or I have more of that depth of field. You see, that's what I like. Okay, lens correction, I don't think we need denoising. How about contrasts? Not contrast, I mean saturation. I think it's okay. And I would like to use to add a bit of local contrast. So nice. And now we can reapply this one to those three photos. And wait a bit. And let's see what kind of result we get. Nice. We don't need to touch anything here. I would like to leave it like that. How about this one? Oh, it's also nice. And third one. Yeah. And now this one or I would like to do manually again, because it's quite flat. Let's say something like that. And I think we need, in this one, we need to much more saturation, because yeah, diffuse and sharpen, lens corrections. Are we good? Yes, we are. And next one, the lady with the candles, exposure, color balance, RGB just tiny bit more contrast, maybe also a bit more global vibrance. Do we need, what do we get? Yeah, could have some white balancing, and maybe in this case I will also try to use next color calibration module for just for the brightening a little bit of the face. Not too much, something like that. Diffuse and sharpen for local contrast, lens correction, and we're done. And with this one I will say, yeah. Next one, it's quite similar situation, so let's try to copy this history from this photo and selective paste that one here and see what we get. No, it's too bright, I can judge immediately, so we need to go down a little bit down with exposure, and maybe add more contrast in the highlights, and I will say we're done. Now, as you can see, we are, if you know what you need to do, you can be quite quick. So you can use some presets, you can transfer some history from one photo to the other. You can also make some styles. For example, if I go there, I need to have the history thingy. Let's say I have just nice adjusted everything in one photo, and now I can save that as style, give it a name, or which kind of modules should be used, and then I can save that and apply it on the photos that I have. For example, you can have here under the styles, you can have also a few styles, but I don't use them so much. And you can apply those styles also to the photo. So if you want to, if you need to be quite effective, you can be quite quick with Darktable if you use those options, those functionality of the Darktable. Okay, I think this episode will be quite large, so let's stop talking, and I hope you have enough information now. If you have some questions, be free to ask in the comment section or go to the pixel.us in the forum, and I will be happy to answer them. Okay, thank you for watching, and until the next time.